As you're going through the lessons found at the beginning of Unit 3, what you're working with is adjectives, words which describe, which modify a noun. And the kind of noun, of course, we're dealing with here is people specifically. We're talking about how to describe people. But you'll find later that the same changes I'm about to explain to you with adjectives will occur when you're describing things as well, masculine or feminine things like el carro or la puerta. Well, you've noticed, undoubtedly, therefore, that adjectives change in their form depending upon what they're describing or whom they're describing. For example, I would just say about myself, yo soy alto, mi esposa es alta, el hombre es viejo, la mujer es vieja. So you hear there's a change in the form of the adjective, the sound of the ending of the adjective, depending upon whom it is describing. And so how is it that we know the form we're initially presented with? The original form of an adjective, as it's presented to you in the ULAT or in a dictionary as well, is the masculine singular form. The form you would use to describe a male or a masculine noun, and only one male or only one item as well. And so what you need to learn is how to go from the masculine to the feminine form of an adjective, and also from the singular to the plural form of an adjective. And then you've covered all the bases at that point of all the different possible forms that an adjective can take. So let me just explain to you rapidly how that's done. Most adjectives, or at least many adjectives, will end in the sound o, like alto, bajo, gordo, delgado, viejo, etc. When an adjective ends in the sound o, and that's the masculine singular form, to make it feminine, you change the o to a. So we would say, el carro, or I'm describing a thing now, el carro es rojo. The car is red. But I would say, la puerta es roja. The door is red. Notice I said roja. So the o changed to a. Again, the example I gave you at the beginning, yo soy alto. Now talking about my wife, mi esposa es alta. So the o changes to a. What do you do with an adjective where the ending of the word is, or the ending of the adjective is not the sound o when it's originally presented to you, like joven? Well, in that case, no change occurs to make that adjective, place that adjective in its feminine form. For example, I would say, el muchacho es joven, la muchacha es joven. There's no change in its form. Now, how do you make an adjective plural? That is to say, how do you put it in a plural form to describe more than one person or more than one thing? Well, that, not surprisingly, is done by adding the sound s to pluralize the adjective at the adjective's end. So, for example, yo soy alto, talking about my kids now, mis hijos son altos. Or using a nationality. Yo soy americano, mis hijas, describing my daughters, mis hijas son americanas. But notice two changes occurred, didn't they? I went from americano to americana, because I'm talking about my daughters, so females. And then I went from americanos to americanas, because I'm describing more than one of them, indicating the plural form of the noun. Now, it will occur, of the adjective, excuse me. It'll occur occasionally that if a word does not end in a vowel sound, for example, delgado is a vowel sound, the o at the end, or bajo has a o, which is a vowel sound at the end, that to make them plural, you must do more than just add the sound s. You have to add an entirely new syllable. I'll show you why. Let's say I want to talk about the boys being young. I can't say los muchachos son jóvenes. Well, I can say it, but it's very awkward to say jóvenes. It's much smoother to add an additional syllable, and that's what is done in Spanish. You don't add just s, you add the sound es, which are the letters es. Es. Instead of jóvenes, I say jóvenes. Jóvenes. Los muchachos son jóvenes. Another example we have here, débil, for example. Débil does not end in a vowel sound, and therefore, to make it plural, if I'm going to say the children are weak, I would say, I don't know if that's very nice to be saying, but it's probably the truth. I would say los niños son, I don't want to say débiles. That's too awkward to have these two consonants next to each other. It's easier and flows more smoothly to say débiles. I add the sound S, or the syllable S, at the end of débil, because débil, not ending in a vowel, flows more smoothly if I say débiles. Well, that's a number of changes, but there's one more explanation to provide to you before I send you to the lesson, and that's, if you notice what verb you're using to communicate the idea of to be, I am, you are, he is, we are, in this particular lesson up to this point. It's been the verb ser, not estar. Now, why is that the case? Ser, if you remember, we already talked about this, describes, or it helps identify a person. It describes things about a person's life that, or is used to, when you're describing something about a person's life which is relatively unchangeable, or at least not temporary and changeable. For example, alto, bajo. You don't change from moment to moment, from being tall to short, etc. And so these things describe you, describe you in a rather definitive way. And so it's ser, which we use in such situations. And you see, therefore, in these particular adjectives, they're all dealing with physical description. Things which don't change, like your emotions and feelings. You'll find in lesson 3.3 that emotions and feelings will be presented to you as adjectives. Those are things that change from moment to moment, and in those situations you'll see the verb estar will be used. Ser, however, is appropriate to use when you're describing a person's physical makeup, because that doesn't change readily. Now, having said that, there's one caveat I must provide. One of these adjectives, the adjective gordo, and even to some extent delgado, but more commonly gordo, truly more commonly uses estar. Why is that the case? It's because being gordo, overweight, is a situation which can change. It doesn't describe who you are as a person over the course of an entire lifetime. If I were to use ser, soy gordo, that would mean that, and if you've seen pictures of me when I was quite young, I was not gordo at all. So that would describe what a person is like in the course of their lifetime. They're just that kind of an overweight person from birth all the way on through the current moment. They're heavy set, you might say. However, it's more common, just to indicate a person is overweight, to use estar. Describing myself, estoy gordo, because it's understood that can change based upon your activity level and your food consumption, I suppose. But be aware that within these lessons, I stick to using ser, which is possible, but a little less likely. I say soy gordo, es gordo, eres gordo, somos gordos. Simply because I want you to associate in your mind the verb ser with physical descriptions, and estar when you're describing a person's feelings, things that change from moment to moment. It's just for the sake of simplicity, but eventually you want to become more subtle and use ser or estar, referring to gordo, and even delgado to some extent, with greater subtlety later on. Okay, I guess that's all I need to say for now. I hope I didn't say too much, and I'll talk to you again soon. Adios. Now I'll go out to the instructions found below this video and carry out those activities.